After my daughter's wedding, I discovered the woman I always tried to hide inside me. I remember that day with a clarity that almost frightens me. My heart was racing, a mixture of anxiety and joy that seemed impossible to contain. It was my daughter Isabella's wedding, and emotion washed over me like waves in a restless sea. She was stunning, walking with light steps, her smile lighting up her face as if the whole world had conspired in her favor. While everyone around me was dazzled, I felt the weight of all the years I had lived, the sleepless nights, the doubts that haunted me. Motherhood had shaped me, but now, seeing her ready to embark on her own journey, I realized I needed to face who I was beyond her mother. Every memory surfaced, every defeat, every fear overcome. What remained for me, after all, was to learn to live for myself, without the shadow of guilt or perfection. I needed to reconnect with Helena, the woman I had been before I lost myself to the demands of the world and my heart. The venue chosen for the ceremony reflected my own anxiety. The old mansion in the city center, with candlelit stone walls and crystal chandeliers. Everything seemed magical, but also intimidating. Every detail, from the flower arrangements to the sound of the piano, echoed within me as a reminder that everything needed to be impeccable. I felt my thoughts swirling, old memories resurfacing, memories of difficult times when I had to be strong while the world seemed to fall apart. Every smile around me made me feel even more fragile. But at the same time, there was beauty in it all. A contrast that reminded me that life could be hard, but also generous, if we knew how to see it. As Isabella got ready, laughing with her friends and adjusting her veil, I realized how quickly time had passed. She was no longer the little girl who followed me through the hallways of my house, asking for a hug or protection. Now, she was an independent, confident woman, ready to create her own story. And I, in turn, needed to come to terms with the fact that my role had changed. I would still be a mother, but not the same mother who had shouldered every responsibility. I needed to learn to be Helena, the woman behind the story, with her pains and victories, fears and achievements. Looking at my daughter made me feel proud, but also afraid. Afraid of not being up to the freedom that now awaited her. The music began to play, announcing the bride's entrance. My heart raced, and a mixture of joy and nostalgia washed over me. Isabella's every step reminded me of all the moments that shaped her life and mine. I needed to be present, fully present, but not just a spectator. I needed to feel, to recognize the woman she had become, and at the same time, the strength I still carried. It was at that moment that I realized that overcoming wasn't just about my past actions, but about the ability to remain standing, despite the wounds. Life tests us, and in that moment, I understood that being a mother isn't synonymous with perfection, but with true presence. When she reached the altar, my heart filled with emotion. The ceremony wasn't just about Isabella. It was also about me, about the woman who survived the storms and still found the courage to celebrate. Her happiness mingled with mine, but it didn't overwhelm me. On the contrary, it reminded me that I could still live my own story, without fear, without rushing. The future appeared like a blank book, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the urge to write each page with my own colors. Motherhood had shaped me, but life still had chapters reserved for Helena. In the days following the celebration, the house felt strangely large and silent. The echo of laughter and conversation that once filled every corner had faded, leaving an almost palpable space. Each room recalled shared moments, small routines that now no longer existed. I drank coffee alone, looked at the empty chair in front of me, and felt the weight of what we call absence. It was a silence that hurt not only because of the physical emptiness, but because it forced me to face Helena head-on. I realized that for years, my identity had been shaped almost exclusively by motherhood, and now I needed to learn to exist without that filter. Every daily movement seemed to bring up old memories, sleepless nights, difficult decisions, moments of fear and courage. I discovered that what had once protected me, the routine of a devoted mother, was now the mirror that showed me how much I had neglected myself. And it was in this silence that Helena began to recognize herself, without needing to compare herself, without needing to justify her own existence. Walking became my refuge. Each morning, the sun seemed to invite me to leave the house and wander streets that had previously gone unnoticed. The smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery, the distant sound of children running through the park, the hurried footsteps of people coming and going. Everything felt new, as if I were seeing the world through eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. I learned to listen to the wind, to notice simple details, to feel alive without having to carry a weight on my shoulders. Each step was a silent reminder that I could still choose how to spend my time, how to shape my emotions, and that freedom didn't have to be scary. I began to understand that life could be lived fully even without major events, simply by observing and feeling. The silence of the house contrasted with this discovery, and I felt I was finally relearning how to exist for myself. On a rainy afternoon, I opened the drawer where I kept old notebooks. Yellowed papers, crooked letters, and forgotten poems stared back at me, reminding me that Helena had always existed before motherhood took over every decision. Leafing through those pages was like revisiting a part of myself I'd left behind, a version of myself that dreamed without fear, wrote without pressure, and believed that life could still be surprising. I felt an intense emotion, a mixture of nostalgia and hope. I decided to write again, allowing the words to flow without haste or judgment. Each written sentence brought back a strength I hadn't realized I had, an ancient courage hidden between the lines and paragraphs. Writing became an exercise in reconnecting with myself, a way to reconstruct Helena in every word, in every feeling I dared to put on paper. One day, I decided to walk to the city's central square. I always passed by it, but never entered the art studio located next door. This time, something compelled me to walk through the door. The smell of paint, wood, and coffee immediately welcomed me. I was greeted by Estella, the owner of the space, a woman with a wide smile who invited me to participate in a Saturday painting workshop. I accepted without a second thought. As I picked up my brushes, I felt a sweet nervousness mixed with an old excitement. Painting became a silent dialogue between my emotions and the colors I spread across the canvas. Each stain and mixture was a confession I couldn't verbalize. And, little by little, I realized that the studio was not just a place for art, but a space for healing, where I could reconnect with the Helena who had been forgotten amidst memories and responsibilities. As Estella and I chatted during class, I noticed that my social life, which had long been limited to motherhood, was beginning to expand again. Between brushstrokes and laughter, shared stories, advice, and venting about losses and reunions emerged. I discovered the power of friendship and genuine support, without pressure or judgment. Each encounter with Estella reminded me that I didn't need to carry the whole world on my shoulders, that there was room for joy, lightness, and spontaneity. I began to find pleasure in the little things, like walking aimlessly, watching the sunset, or simply writing in my notebook. Little by little, loneliness stopped being just absence and became an opportunity for self-discovery. Helena was rediscovering herself, learning that life could be lived from the inside out, and that true strength lies not in carrying everything alone, but in allowing oneself to exist authentically. It was during a sunny afternoon in the central square that I met Miguel. He carried an old-fashioned camera, as if he'd stepped out of another era, and walked around observing every detail around him, capturing moments that would go unnoticed by most. When our eyes met, there was a moment of silent recognition, as if each of us felt the other's presence without needing words. He asked me if he could photograph the light reflecting off leaves wet from the morning rain. I accepted, surprised by the naturalness of his presence. Watching me paint and photograph, I felt something new. Someone who saw beyond appearances, who could perceive the essence of what I felt, without questioning, without rushing, simply accepting. That simplicity touched me deeply, bringing a kind of comfort I hadn't remembered existed. Over time, Miguel began to frequent the square at the same times as me, always silent, always attentive. Short conversations about photography turned into long exchanges about life, art, and forgotten dreams. He told stories of places he'd visited, people he'd met, and moments that had shaped his life, and I, in turn, opened my heart, talking about the pain, losses, and lessons life had taught me. There was a complicity that grew slowly, unhurriedly, without demands. I began to realize I could trust him, that I didn't have to carry my emotions alone, that the presence of someone attentive and sincere could be a balm for my weary heart. Miguel didn't come to replace anyone, but to remind me that there was still room for new connections. One day, he invited me for a walk to the nearby river. We walked side by side, talking about photography, painting, and the beauty of capturing life's small moments. With each step, I felt something inside me stirring, a mixture of curiosity, joy, and serenity I hadn't felt in a long time. When we stopped to observe the reflections of the trees in the water, Miguel said, "Sometimes life gives us the chance to see things from a different angle, and that's when everything changes." I remained silent, absorbing his message. That was exactly how I felt, ready to change, to look at myself more lovingly, without judgment, without fear of starting over. For the first time in a long time, I took a deep breath and realized I was truly alive. Another afternoon, we went to Estella's studio together, painting side by side. Miguel observed my brush strokes, commenting on colors, textures, and sensations, and I realized he saw beyond the surface, perceiving what I was trying to express without words. What began as a discreet presence became a comforting companion, an exchange of energy that made me feel lighter. His every smile, every gesture of attention reminded me that life could still be beautiful, even after so much loss and challenge. And I finally realized the world didn't have to be faced alone. There was room to open up, trust, and allow yourself to feel again. As the weeks passed, Miguel and I developed a silent yet meaningful routine. We walked, photographed, painted, and, above all, learned to listen to each other without rushing. He didn't arrive with promises or expectations. He was simply present, offering companionship and understanding. Gradually, I realized that my solitude was no longer a void, but an opportunity for conscious connection. Miguel's presence taught me that life could be lived with ease, that the most valuable bonds emerge when authenticity prevails. Helena began to transform from the inside out, rediscovering the courage to open herself to the world without fear, ready to feel and live fully, with her own colors and intensity. As time passed, my meetings with Miguel ceased to be mere moments of distraction and became small journeys of self-discovery. Every conversation, every attentive gesture, made me realize nuances of myself that had long been dormant. The life I had led before, so full of commitments and responsibilities, seemed distant, almost like a forgotten dream. He didn't judge my choices or pressure me to be different. He was simply there, patient and present. And this, silently, began to transform the way I saw myself. For the first time, I felt I could be vulnerable without losing my strength, that I could show my imperfections without fear of rejection. Every shared smile, every lingering look, reminded me that life could still be light, even after so many challenges. On a cold afternoon, we walked through nearly deserted streets covered in dry leaves. The wind blew gently, as if guiding us slowly. Miguel held my hand naturally, and I felt a wave of emotion course through me. It wasn't just a physical gesture, but symbolic. It was trust. It was complicity. It was the realization that we didn't need words to connect. I felt my heart warm with that closeness, realizing I was learning to surrender gradually, without fear of losing myself. The sensation was strange and at the same time comforting, as if I were returning to a place within myself that had been forgotten. It was there, in that moment, that I realized that the courage to open up is also the courage to allow yourself to truly feel. Little by little, I began sharing more of my routine, my thoughts, and even small fears I'd kept to myself. Miguel listened attentively, without interruptions, without judgment. There was a gentleness in his presence that made me feel safe. I discovered I could laugh at myself again, that I could cry when necessary, and that every expression was met with understanding. That gradual openness taught me not to fear my own feelings, to accept them as part of who I am. And all the while, I realized my relationship with Isabella was also strengthening. By allowing myself to live and feel authentically, I was showing her that strength lies not in hiding one's weaknesses, but in integrating them into one's life. One Sunday, we decided to explore a small bookstore downtown. Among shelves of old books and the smell of yellowed pages, we talked about dreams, memories, and what happiness meant to each of us. Miguel commented on the importance of recognizing small achievements and realizing that life is built in the details. That struck me deeply. I realized that my victories didn't have to be grand to be valuable. Every day I was able to be true to myself. Every choice I made with awareness and courage was a victory. His presence helped me realize that emotional reconstruction wasn't a one-time event, but an ongoing process, made of small moments that, together, create a full life. As evening fell, we sat in a cafe near the bookstore. The yellow lights reflected off our hands on the table, and the sense of intimacy was almost palpable. Miguel smiled and said, "You have incredible strength," even without realizing it. That sentence resonated within me as a reminder of everything I'd experienced and overcome. For the first time in a long time, I felt I didn't need to carry my past as a burden, that I could simply exist, whole and imperfect, yet valuable. Helena was finally recognizing herself, learning to trust love, people, and above all, herself. Every step I took with Miguel was a step toward freedom, a step that reaffirmed my ability to start over and live authentically and intensely. The following days brought a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. Helena began to perceive herself as a whole person, capable of living without submitting to other people's expectations. Each morning, as she opened the window and felt the sun touch her face, she realized she no longer needed to carry the rush to be perfect, nor the weight of guilt for moments gone by. Isabella, increasingly confident and happy, became a reflection of the strength I always wanted to pass on to her. Not unattainable perfection, but the courage to face life with authenticity. I felt proud observing her independence, her genuine joy, and realized that the greatest legacy she could leave was not advice, but examples of resilience, courage, and self-love. My relationship with Miguel deepened naturally. He demanded nothing more than my presence, and this taught me more than any previous experience. That love and true connection flourish when there's no rush, when space is allowed for the other to fully exist. Walks around the city, afternoons in the studio, moments of shared silence. Each instant was proof that life could be both light and intense at the same time. For the first time, I felt I didn't need to fear vulnerability. On the contrary, it strengthened me, making me more aware of my own essence. Helena was growing not only as a mother, but as a woman capable of reinventing herself, of opening herself to life without fear. 1. Late afternoon, sitting on a park bench, I watched Isabella chatting with friends, laughing without a care in the world. A deep feeling of gratitude overcame me, for everything I've experienced, for all the falls and ups and downs, and for finally being able to celebrate who we are without rushing. Her every smile, every gesture of self-confidence, reminded me that the cycle of life continues, and that my role now was no longer to protect, but to support and inspire by example. Helena felt whole, her heart light and open, able to realize that true happiness lies in embracing one's own journey and living authentically. Upon returning home, I found Miguel waiting, camera in hand, ready to capture a sunset that looked magnificent. We walked together to the terrace, watching the golden light bathe the city. He smiled and said, "Life has these unexpected colors, doesn't it?" I smiled back, realizing that, yes, life had surprised me, not with perfection, but with opportunities to reconnect, with myself and the people I chose to be around. Helena felt a warmth in her chest, a serene certainty that every step taken so far, every difficulty faced, had been worth it. Overcoming adversity isn't a one-time event. It's the sum of small victories, conscious decisions, and the courage to reinvent oneself at every moment. That night, as I fell asleep, I thought of Isabella, Miguel, and myself. I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. Helena finally understood that she didn't need to be perfect to deserve happiness. What mattered was authenticity, the courage to always start over, and the ability to transform pain into strength. Every challenge faced, every tear shed, every moment of doubt had been part of building a stronger, more resilient, and vibrant woman. Life would continue to bring ups and downs, but now I was ready to embrace each moment with an open heart, aware that the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the freedom to be fully ourselves.